Welcome to the East Ward Update. I'm Darrell Montgomery, Council Member of the East Ward. On this episode, we'll discuss some key successes from 2013 and we'll discuss plans for next year. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the East Ward Update. I'm joined now by City Manager Lee Garrity. Mr. Garrity, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Lee Garrity, the Winston-Salem City Manager.
So, as we told everyone today, we're going to talk just a little bit about the year in review, particularly looking at 2013 and seeing some things that we've had to do over this last year, from budgetary items to some developmental things that we've seen. Let's start at the top of that with the budget.
Okay.
We came into 2013 knowing that we were going to be facing some issues that were going to be directly linked to the fact of drops in appraisal values for properties in Forsyth County. And so our staff, along with yourself, had to work very hard to come and present a budget to council that was able to keep a high level of services but saw a large amount of revenue that was coming in being reduced. What was it that you all saw as you all struggled through that process?
The biggest change was revaluation. Because of property tax revaluation, the tax base dropped significantly, about 10%. And as you know, it wasn't even. It dropped. It varied from 50 to 60% to some places where it went up. But overall, the tax base dropped about 10%. Council had given us an objective to make sure that we maintain the same level of services and tried to have what we call revenue neutral tax rate, which is the same tax rate, the same effective tax rate as previously, so that the city doesn't either gain or lose money from revaluation. This year, because of the drop, we had to increase the rate to come up with the same amount of money as we had before. But we were able to actually not increase all the way to revenue neutral. So effectively we cut the tax rate by about a penny and 1.25 cents and still maintained all of our services.
We also saw an added service this year in Sunday bus service.
Yes, that was something that was a very important thing to you and the rest of the City Council and the Mayor. We are the only major city in the state that did not have Sunday service, so we were able to find the funds to about $400,000 annually to operate Sunday service, and we kicked that off just back in November.
And so right now we are about to go into December, and we'll start halfway through our actual physical year as a city. Right now, almost halfway through the physical year, what do you see as an outlook for us going into the future?
It's slow growth, but at least it's not negative growth. So it's early yet, but so far it looks like we'll have a little bit of growth in property tax, quite a bit of growth, not huge, but a good amount of growth in sales tax. It'll be another challenging budget, but I don't think it'll be as difficult as it's been in a few of the past years.
Okay, so that's something good to look at, but specifically looking at over the past few budgetary seasons, it's been a trying time. And I think we do have to give kudos to city staff for working very diligently and bringing something to council, and then council navigating that process to pass on something that would really work to continue to put services. Because at the end of the day, it's about the citizens in the city of Winston-Salem and making sure that they have a level of service that they can feel comfortable with and that keeps their quality of life at a high level.
It's very remarkable the work that the staff has done. If you look at this year's budget, it's about the same as the budget was in 2008 before the recession hit. So we've weathered those 5 years, 6 years with just some remarkable hard work by all of our city employees.
Yeah. Changing the subject just a little bit, we've seen a lot of things happening in the city over this last year. Particularly, we've seen a lot of things happen in downtown, particularly as we look at the Research Park, now Innovation Quarter. This year we saw a change in the naming of that. That's now Wake Forest Innovation Quarter. Still do the same work there, but just under a different name. We see work continue to happen along that area. We see the place where Inmar will be their future home, is far underway and close to being ready for them to get ready to move in. We've seen Research Parkway be completed and open this year. What does that mean, in your opinion, to this community?
I think it's very significant. I think over the next 2 years you're going to see lots of growth around the Research Park and the new Parkway. There's been over $200 million of investment in the last few years between Inmar and the other biotech places that have gone up in the park. But now that it's become a destination, I think you will see more people wanting to live, work, and play in the park. And the bottom line is that's going to create jobs, and jobs for the entire community.
And as the council member that represents that area for me, I'm also excited about that opportunity to continue to blur the lines of 52. Because as you stand on Research Parkway and look towards the east, you can see that it still is some difference as you look between the two there. But I'm hopeful for the opportunities of what's happening in the park will spill over into the community on the other side of 52 and continue to push for those opportunities that are there in that area.
That is our hope. In fact, you've led a lot of the work to do the planning for the area just east of 52 and making sure that that development is a mixed-use development that complements and takes advantage of the business park.
Yeah, and when we see with Inmar alone that there'll be about 800 or so totally new people into downtown Winston-Salem that are currently not there. That means that there's going to be a need for additional services that's going to have to accompany those individuals. We see work on new housing projects not far from that location. As we continue to see that happening in that area, as a manager and working with myself and the other members of council, you always get the question of investment in downtown, and I get the same question about where do we find the balance between making investment in downtown and not making investment in other areas of our city. At this point, as we continue to walk down that road, as a manager, what do you see as the answer to that question?
It is a balance. It's important that we take care of downtown because the downtown is the core of the entire city. If your downtown is stagnant, your entire city will suffer. But I think as we go forward and as downtown grows, we need to look and make sure that the peripheral areas of downtown as well as other areas of the community aren't left behind. I think in almost every case, the city is willing to work with developers, businesses throughout the city to make sure that the entire city grows.
And I'm glad you mentioned about businesses, because for me as a council member coming on in 2009, small businesses was at the core of one of the things I want to support, and it's continued to be one of the things I want to push, and looked at how we can shift some things within our own structure to do more for small businesses. And this year we saw the award of the first Small Business Plan Award that we had the individual who won that award, and looking forward to the next round of that, and really an opportunity to incentivize our small business community for those who are upstarts or those who are willing to just wanting to go. But we know that the biggest issue for small businesses is that startup capital at the very beginning. How do you overcome that hurdle? And I'm glad that we're moving in that direction. How do you see for opportunities for our small business program?
That program, which is your idea, the Small Business Award Program, was really important because it brings awareness. And we have, as you know, many programs for small businesses, loans, incentives, and technical assistance as well. But we need to have more awareness so that that entrepreneur who's wants to start a business knows, hey, wait a minute, the city is there to help us. The city knows that 2/3 of job growth comes from small businesses. The city knows that the core of what we do comes from small businesses. So we need more awareness, more marketing, and more outreach to current and future small businesses.
Yeah, and even looking at that program itself, I know all staff wasn't totally sold on the program itself, but I'm happy that the community showed up, because it showed that there is a real desire for it. I know some thought that maybe there wasn't going to be a big outcry for people to come out, but when they did the notices for that, the room was packed.
The room was packed. People applied, yes, lots of interest.
Yeah, and so I think that just continues continues to show that there are a lot of people in the community that have an entrepreneurial spirit, but they don't know always how to navigate that. And I'm glad we have programs at the city, and we have community development corporations that also help to work that, and we have other small business organizations in the community that try to push those things in that direction. As we've seen also this year and in years past, city's been a big supporter of our housing authority in this community, and we've continued to support them as they've gone after choice neighborhood grants for their Cleveland Avenue homes redevelopment project. And happy to know now that they received a $500,000 planning grant that's going to help them move towards actually realizing the successes that they believe they can have in that part of our community. What do you think that's going to mean to that area?
I think it's huge. As you know, that area is one of our most challenged neighborhoods in the community. It has lots of calls for service from different city departments. It has lots of need for improvement, and it's basically driven by poverty and by the housing condition. And Hawes realized that several years ago and did a very, very ambitious master plan. And now with this Choice Neighborhood Grant that starts that process, it literally gets our foot in the door for operational money to redevelop that area. I think it's just very exciting. I think it's a great investment in our community to spend money proactively instead of reactively.
Yeah, and Winston-Salem's not different from many other cities across the country when they've done housing projects that specifically targeted towards individuals at low income and individuals who are in poverty. And historically, when many of those projects were started and built, they were all clumped together in many areas. And we see some of that same issues. And I'm one that really looks towards the time where we'll see neighborhoods that are no longer just low-income neighborhoods, but they're mixed income. And I think that's a big part of this plan, that they're going to move towards how do we make neighborhoods where you have individuals who are well off as well as those who need just a little assistance, all living in the same neighborhood, being able to thrive off of each other and learn from one another in those communities. What we've seen a lot of, in my opinion, is not so much a move towards segregation by race, but more so by economic status. And so we see neighborhoods that are more fluent and financially well off, and then others that are just dwelling a lot in a more poverty stricken areas. And so I think with individuals and organizations such as the Housing Authority coming in with this type of vision, this type of plan to say we as a community have to come together and understand that there's a larger issue at the bottom of this, which is poverty, but how do we come in together and actually work towards bringing a resolution that's going to be lasting? Because they can build new buildings, but if they don't work to develop people, it doesn't make the difference.
That's right.
We've also seen over the course of this year, as we see the master plan in Halls, we've also had master plans of our own in the city of Winston-Salem, particularly within our parks and rec. We've seen Salem Lake master plan, and we've also seen master plans for Winston Lake. And, it builds a great vision for what these two parks in our community can be. And many people in the area, in the East Ward specifically, ask the question of when is this going to happen? When can we expect for something like this? What is it going to take for those master plans that we've approved over this past year to actually come to fruition?
It will take a bond referendum. Council's going to look at options for a bond referendum this spring, for potentially next fall. We have several $100 million of identified capital needs, of which the park master plans probably make up $100 million of that. So I imagine that we'll do it in phases, but my hope is that we make some, through a bond referendum, we make some real dramatic changes and improvements. Those parks are our jewels. They're really, really important that we invest in.
As we look at opportunities, such as we continue to look at the parks, and that it'll take bond referendum to actually make that happen. Some opportunities within doing bonds are making sure that we're able to do some capital improvements in areas that we haven't been able to do in the past. We we've looked at a lot of different areas in our community as we considered that opportunity about a year ago of bringing something, but the council decided not to. What are some of the most delayed improvements that you see as a manager that we need to pay attention to?
Our public safety areas is just some deferred maintenance where we have to do some major renovations to our public safety center, and council is looking at the potential of establishing 3 police districts at the same time to move the police more into the community so they're more visible and more engaged. That's a critical one. Transportation is always a major need. Sidewalks, streets. A big one that's sitting out there is Union Station, redeveloping Union Station. And now that the city owns the former Davis Garage Union Station, it's going to take a significant investment to restore that historic building and make it an integral part of that part of the community.
And I'm glad you mentioned Union Station because as we look at that particular site and look at that building, it has a grave history to the entire Winston-Salem community. And as we move forward, I think that we're going to have a great opportunity to make that an icon for other train stations in North Carolina, but also I think across the country that have seen that type of redevelopment happen in train station as we continue to move it to a multimodal transportation center that will be able to accommodate several different types of transportation, but will, as you said, become an integral part of the community that's located there. You know, when we started out this last year, there was a couple things that we had on our agenda that we wanted to take a look at. And one of those things were operations of our facilities, particularly Lawrence Joel Coliseum and Bowman Gray Stadium. As of today, Lawrence Joel has been sold to Wake Forest University, and we have agreed to a resolution of intent to sell Bowman Gray Stadium to Winston-Salem State University. Just refresh us about the process of what we went through and why we're in this place right now.
Sure. The reason we looked at the sale in both cases was the cost of operating the facilities. So we run an annual loss of $400,000 to $500,000 to operate the facilities, and then the major capital improvements that were needed for both facilities in the nature of $20 million in improvements over the next 5 to 10 years that need to be made. So we looked to see if there were community partners, particularly the universities, who might be interested in partnering with the city, owning the asset, taking on that cost, but also still making sure that they were available to the community so that the citizens would benefit without having to directly pay the bill. That's the main reason that we looked at it. We went through a long negotiation with both universities, mainly for Wake Forest, to make sure that the Joel name was protected and preserved, because that's so much of the history of that facility. When it comes to Bowman Gray Stadium, the General Assembly gave the Winston-Salem State the authority to purchase it. We are waiting right now on the State Property Office to make the formal offer and then bring that to council, hopefully the first of the year, so that we can make that title transfer in the not too distant future.
And in both instances, I know that to parts of the community, the actual facilities, but then also the names of those facilities, as you mentioned, are enshrined in the history of Winston-Salem. And so in both of those instances, it will be the desire. And in Lawrence Joel, we have made certain provisions, and Wake Forest has stated and committed to doing things to continue to pay homage and tribute to Lawrence Joel as part of the Coliseum itself. And also looking towards Bowman Gray Stadium, what are some things that are in that process? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the General Assembly has, in part of some of the things that they had discussions about that, spoke to the name of Bowman Gray Stadium.
The name will be maintained. It's required in the legislation. Bowman Gray Stadium, the name will be maintained. The university could sell the name of the field, but it will still be Bowman Gray Stadium. Racing will be protected in a long-term lease, so racing will also maintain at the stadium. In addition, Civitan Park, which is between Winston-Salem State's campus and the stadium, would be sold to Winston-Salem State, but all of the recreational and wildlife that are at the park will be protected with a conservation easement, so there won't be any disturbance to the wildlife, the birds, the water, or any of that.
And while we're still at Bowman Gray, there are all the time and almost every year there's questions and concern during between racing and football season, particularly when it comes to parking. This year was no different in terms of concerns that we had from individual citizens that live in the community and also individuals who come and patron Bowman Gray Stadium. And as we continue to move through that, we've done some things specifically to try to make sure that at both events that take place there, that individuals are treated the same way. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
The primary difference was that Winston-Salem State, at their request, charges for parking. Racing doesn't. And because the way the lease worked, the city operated the lots for Winston-Salem State, and also the city paid for law enforcement. And because of the trying to make sure that people paid to park, we were asking the police to enforce the parking restrictions on streets around the stadium. Racing, because they weren't charging for parking, we weren't involved in that process. We did change it this year and have used more. What we did this year was use cones and other things to try to stop people from parking where they shouldn't, but we did not issue tickets during football games unless someone was blocking a fire hydrant or a handicap space.
In over the next few years, it's going to be a different place as you go around Bowman Gray Stadium because of what's going to take place with the Salem Creek Connector that will run from Martin Luther King at the top closer to Reynolds Park Road and run back through and connect into the newly opened Research Parkway that will go through what is currently City Yard.
Right.
What does that do for transportation and connectivity?
Well, several things it does. One, because of the future closing of Business 40 for 2 years, that'll divert some of the traffic, so that traffic coming from the south won't have to go onto Business 40. It also really should help reduce the traffic flow on MLK through Winston-Salem State University's campus. As you know, that's a very congested area, lots of students crossing the street. We've used fencing, but even with fencing it's still dangerous, so this will take quite a bit of the traffic, at least the northbound traffic, off of MLK and directly route it downtown. It also really does open up the Research Parkway as a very vibrant economic development area.
And I think moving forward, we have a lot of great opportunities for us in the community and as a city. And I think the East Ward itself is in a great position to continue to benefit from a lot that's happening. One thing that has been very dear to me as well is been housing in our community, and how do we make sure that we continue to move forward to make sure that both single-family housing as well as multifamily and apartments are on par with what they should be in terms of quality, but then also make sure that people have access to affordable housing in our community, and that is balanced. And I think that we've seen some new developments happen, particularly over in the area that Housing Authority has been working with the Oaks at 10th, which I believe is a very great project that is going to be a step-up housing, which is something different for the Housing Authority, which means that individuals who move into that project have to have some form of employment. But it's an incentive for individuals who want to start that process of being able to shift where they are in community. But across the East Ward, there are other communities that we're looking at and trying to do some work to really shift where housing stands and how we continue to move that forward. And we have some partners in some of our community development corporations that are helping in that process and trying to move that forward. What do you see as opportunities for us as we look at opportunities in housing?
What I'm suggesting to council is that we take the success that we have found from our project we've had the last several years to revitalize urban commercial areas, where we focused a lot of resources, infrastructure, and partnered with both businesses and nonprofits to let's really fix one area at a time. So we're going to look at that same concept for residential neighborhoods, where you've got neighborhoods that could use improvements, both the physical condition of the housing, but also the sidewalks, the lighting, the landscaping, where you've got a neighborhood association or a community development corporation who can partner with the city. And can we come up with some methods where we could really focus our resources one neighborhood at a time to really make a significant difference?
And for me, that's been a frustration of mine, because oftentimes I think we do spot work that does not make as large an impact as if we did consolidate into a specific area. And what happens if we concentrate our resources for a specific period of time in one area and then move to a next? I think we'd see a larger bang for our buck and a larger transition with some of the things that take place there. So moving into 2014 and forward, I think that we're going to have some great opportunities. I think we've seen some things good happen over the course of this year. We still have some issues in some areas that we struggle with and that we want to continue to work on. We've seen a new police chief come in this year who is doing some great work in the community and continues to hear the voice of the community that says that they want to have better relationships with our police department. We're looking forward, as you stated, to some things that has within the budget moving forward that may loosen just a little bit, some opportunities that we may have there. But then also looking at some deferred maintenance on facilities and some visioning that we've completed in planning. Let's now look towards an opportunity to actually put some dollars behind those things and make it happen. And for me, it's going to be about making sure that the entire community benefits from what happens. I think as a city manager and as a council member, we have to work together in order to get things done for the community. And I think that this year has been one where we've seen our struggles, but then we look forward to some greater opportunities in the future.
I think there's lots of excitement ahead of us.
Well, again, I thank you for coming and being on the hot seat and having this conversation today, and look forward to what we have going forward within the next few years in the city of Winston-Salem.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this month's East Ward Update. Remember, you can see this show in its entirety on the city's website. Just click on the video link on the top left of the webpage. You can also see it on the city's YouTube channel. I'm Durwell Montgomery. Thank you for watching.